The Dark Souls series is notorious for three things: epic boss fights, obscene difficulty, and lots of dying. In fact, the first release of Dark Souls with the DLC expansion is called the Prepare to Die edition, and it doesn't get much more clear than that. Hello, I am Parker, and this is Park and Play. Today we're going to be looking at Dark Souls. Dark Souls is a third-person action role-playing game developed by From Software and published by Namco Bandai Games in September of 2011, with the remastered version being released in May of 2018. Dark Souls was released to near universal acclaim and won numerous Game of the Year awards and spawned 2 sequels. Dark Souls employs minimalistic storytelling to convey its plot and lore. Historical events in its world and their significance are often implicit or left to player interpretation, rather than being fully shown or explained. Most of the story is given to the player through dialogue from non-player characters within the game, flavor text from items, and world design. The opening cutscene establishes the premise of the game. Dragons once ruled the world, and in this period, a man known as Gwyn discovered the object known as the First Flame and discovers Lord Souls within. He and his allies use their newfound power to defeat the dragons, which then begins the Age of Fire. Over time, the flames begin to fade with the rise of humans, and Gwyn sacrifices himself to prolong the Age of Fire unnaturally. With the flame artificially rekindled, the undead curse begins to plague humanity, causing some humans to resurrect upon death constantly. The player character, that's right, you are one of these cursed undead, locked away in an undead asylum. After escaping the asylum, you travel to Lordran, the city of the gods, to ring the bells of awakening, and then embark on your own quest to either relight or snuff out the First Flame. Along the way, you will travel many lands, fight numerous enemies, and make several friends along the way. A core mechanic of the game is exploration. Players are encouraged by the game to proceed with caution, learn from past mistakes, or find alternative areas to explore. Dark Souls takes place in a large and continuous open-world environment, connected through a central hub area. The player character can travel between areas and explore various paths at will, although prerequisites have to be met to unlock certain areas. A central element to the gameplay of Dark Souls is the bonfire. Bonfires are scattered throughout the world and serve as checkpoints for each level. By resting at a bonfire, the player character is healed to full and regains all of the healing charges of their Estus flask. They can also level up and perform other functions, such as attuning magic and repairing and upgrading equipment. However, resting at a bonfire respawns all the world's enemies except for bosses and friendly non-playable characters. Player characters' interactions within the world of Dark Souls includes a great deal of combat. Combat includes melee attacks, various forms of defensive maneuvering, and magical abilities. For melee attacks, players have a wide access of fantasy medieval-style weaponry, including swords, spears, maces, and imaginary fantasy weapons such as magical swords, huge great swords, and immense clubs and hammers. For defense, players have access to shields, armor, dodge rolling, and parrying. For magic, there's a wide variety of offensive and defensive abilities known as sorceries, miracles, and pyromancies. In Dark Souls, players do not use any form of mana as in most other fantasy RPGs. Instead, they gain a discrete number of uses for each attuned spell when resting at a bonfire. These various forms of combat all have trade-offs, variations, and in-game costs associated with them, and all of them can be buffed or altered in some fashion through leveling, blacksmithing, consumable items, magical rings, or new equipment. However, if there is a criticism to be made of the game, it's that it seems like the developers ran out of steam when designing the second half of the story. After defeating the Golden Duo in Anor Londo, often seen as the crescendo of the Dark Souls game, later levels seem to pale in comparison. This is especially egregious with the Demon Ruins Lost Izalith area, with numerous recycled enemies placed haphazardly across the area without as much care given as the earlier areas. In conclusion, many critics consider Dark Souls to be one of the best games ever made, and for good reason. Its depth of combat, intricate level design, and minimalistic world lore make it one of the most fun games I have personally ever played. The game was successful enough to spawn 2 sequels. Do I recommend it? Well, what do you think? Try it for yourself. Let me know what you think. This has been Parker from Park and Play. Back to you in the studio.